Hello, beautiful people. This is Soren from Scientifically Savage, and today we're going to talk about emotional castration. This is going to be a story of my experience with antidepressant medication. I figure it's just fair to put a disclaimer out there. This is only my personal experience. This is not telling you what you should or should not do, or should or should not take. That's your decision alongside your healthcare professional. Yet again, I'm hoping that my story might give you a bit of an insight in order for you to take an educated choice and see what alternatives are out there in terms of managing our mental health. Just a bit of a context behind it. I am diagnosed with combined ADHD, severe anxiety and depression, and also deal with PTSD episodes. Even though my diagnosis is relatively recent, within the last year or so, I have been dealing with this for majority of my life, and I managed it in different ways. And that's where this story starts. Where early on this year, after I would say, let's say it started 4 years ago when I started looking at managing my mental health through the NHS, which is the healthcare provider here in the UK. And the first time antidepressants were offered to me, way before diagnosis even happened. I was not a big fan of the idea of having to depend on a pill in order to manage my mood. And maybe because I also worked for about 5 years in the pharmaceutical industry, uh, I didn't really have to do with medication in terms of mental health, but I worked my way up to working in developing oncology medication. And it is a bit disheartening seeing the fact that there's no real interest in terms of what's developing out there in terms of the R&D to treat any diseases. It's more treating symptoms, not necessarily treating the root cause. This is not me saying that the pharmaceutical industry is evil. I think there's a bunch of useful stuff in the pharmaceutical stuff. Uh, Yet again, we have to understand that the pharmaceutical world is a business, and as any business, they're looking for customers, and there's not that much money to be made in fixing a problem and someone not having to buy your product ever again. So that's why we tend to see that majority of medication out there are meant to treat symptoms, not necessarily deal with the root cause. And knowing that, uh, explains why I was hesitant to go and start taking antidepressant medication. Yet again, this year things got a bit rough, and I was considering looking for ADHD medication, as that I defined is the root cause of my anxiety and depression. So trying to get ADHD medication here in the UK, where you already got a diagnosis privately, it's a mess. And because I can tell you openly, I've been told to my face by a healthcare professional the reason why I got discharged and I'm not getting access to treatment for my ADHD is because I'm fit, well presented, and I've managed to hold some high level jobs in the past that I don't think I need support. So they offered me again, potentially for the sixth or seventh time, where I went on the journey of getting diagnosed and looking for mental health support, antidepressants. And because of my personal choice of trying to have the book knowledge but also practical experiences, I said, screw it, let's take it and see what happens and actually keep an eye to really follow the process of taking antidepressants. So there you go. Week 1 to week 2 of taking antidepressant, the most common side effects, which I had to deal with a few of them, were nausea, and it makes a lot of sense as the type of medication I took was a SSRI, which is a serotonin inhibitor. So it binds to the serotonin receptor in your brain, which allows you to have more serotonin floating around. As you might have seen in a previous video where I talk about serotonin, uh, serotonin is the molecule of making you feel good about the things you have. So that's the aim they are trying to take with medication towards depression. There's new research coming out saying that it makes people feel better, but it's actually not dealing with the depression. But I feel like we already knew that, and that's a story for another time. So, with 70% of the serotonin in your body being in your gut, having something that messes up with serotonin, you would expect that would mess up with your digestive system. It was not necessarily too bad. My appetite kind of went away, which is not necessarily a bad thing because I eat a lot. So I'm always eating an excess of calories. So that was not a bad thing. Too bad anyway. Slight headaches, nothing too bad. After 2 weeks, I started feeling the effects of the antidepressant medication. And to describe those effects, I guess that's why I describe it at the start of the video as emotional castration. Usually, you have a range of emotion that would go like this. On antidepressant is like this, and it might not seem bad because the lows don't feel so low anymore. But also, it takes away the highs. You don't really get excited about stuff anymore. And again, that's my experience. You just feel okay. And for people who have ADHD and are late diagnosis, the comorbid diagnosis with ADHD in 70% of the cases will be anxiety. And anxiety and ADHD have this interesting dance, if you want to call that, where ADHD causes the anxiety, and the anxiety makes the ADHD symptoms better in a way because the anxiety provides enough of a stimulus for you to get some of those things done. So when you take away the anxiety with medication, it actually amplifies the symptoms of ADHD. And my ADHD symptoms became very hard to deal with. And at the same time, I was just whelmed. I was just meh, it was fine, which makes it extremely dangerous. And that's why we're seeing relatively high suicide rate when it comes to antidepressant medication because you know that things are wrong and are not going well, but all of a sudden you don't really feel anything about it. And that for me was a bit of a wake up call when I had the closest thing to a mother pass away. And my emotions were muzzled. Again, going at the emotional castration, how I described it. That's how I felt. Like I didn't have the edge anymore. I didn't get a chance to grieve. And that's when I came off it because it is important for the human experience to be able to experience being human. And that means experience the lows and the highs and not just becoming a zombie that's just okay with things. Again, maybe this is just my personal choice. Uh, and if you look at the neurobiology aspect of it, which I think it's quite interesting to look at, serotonin, having an abundance of it, makes you feel happy with what you have. But at the same time, if we're looking at uh, dopamine, which is something that the ADHD brain lacks, and a lot of us could use some more and enjoy it because it gives us that it's the molecule of more is a driving force that makes us achieve things or get out of a situation. That won't Dopamine itself is made out of adrenaline. Obviously, this is an extremely simplified answer, but just to understand, you need to have the stress to trigger the motivation. And if you take away the stress with a chemical thing, you then won't have the chemical motivation that comes from dopamine. And even if you feel okay on antidepressants, it won't give you the motivation and the urge to do anything to change the circumstances that caused the depression in the first place. And that's where, again, we see people feeling the need to depend on this medication and they don't have the motivation of doing any of the things that could actually create a better environment for them to not be depressed in the first place. So I do believe that antidepressant medication is extremely helpful as a band-aid. It is in moments of crisis when your mental health is really low, using it for a while in order to stabilize yourself, and at the same time using discipline because you can't use your own neurobiology because that's against you. If you have an excess of serotonin, you won't have the motivation of doing anything to push you that far because you don't have the stress that triggers you to push far. And you need the discipline to put systems in place to fix your life up or whatever you want to call it, to enable you to get yourself out of that situation. And I think that is something that it's not discussed enough. And there's way too many people that just understand that they feel a bit better on antidepressants and like, oh, I guess I take this for the rest of my life. Well, obviously, there's long-term repercussions of taking any sort of drug, and it might also, from my experience, it might stop you from achieving your goals. Maybe this is just an interaction between the ADHD brain and antidepressants, but I would be cautious about having to depend on it for life and just taking it as a fix. It's not fixed. It might alleviate some of the symptoms. And there's, if you want to deal with the root cause of those symptoms, you need to make the lifestyle changes in order to enforce it. And that might be, the three best thing that you can do to manage your depression and your mental health are sleep is number one, your diet and nutrition being second, and the third one being exercise. After that, I would say look at your relationships, and after that, if you have a stable physical health, you are exercising a lot or enough, you have your diet in control, and you sleeping enough, and the quality of your sleep is enough, and you then can go out and create some of those relationships, and you will see that the effects of the depression itself are going to go away. Obviously, there is the subject of depression and the subject of brain health and mental health. We know some things about it, but we still don't know almost anything. But we do know that lifestyle choices tend to be way more effective than trying to pop a pill every day. Again, if you choose to do that, it's your choice. And I know a lot of people have amazing benefits on antidepressant medication, but I do not believe it should be your first option. As I described it at first, at the start of the video, for me, it felt like emotional castration. And I think being human, even when sometimes it sucks to be human and our mental health, it's low, um, it still might be the thing we need in order for us to have the motivation to do the changes in our life to actually create a better environment. Just something to consider. And again, if you have any questions when it comes to this, put them down below. Subscribe, share, all the YouTube things. And remember that you're not alone in this. And I love you.